The fork never touched the steak. That's the detail I keep going back to. It was sitting there, perfectly seared, the kind of steak that costs more than my week of groceries. The waiter had just set it down in front of me. Cambria was mid-sentence. Greg, her boss, was laughing too loud. Everyone had their wine, their smiles, their company-issued charm. And I never took a bite. I keep thinking, what if I had? What if I had taken that first bite? Chewed slowly, nodded at the compliments? Maybe I would have stayed. Maybe the whole thing would have gone down differently. Or maybe I still would have walked out when she said it. Because that sentence, that damn sentence, ended everything. Let's be honest, he's not exactly built for ambition. That's what she said. Out loud. In front of her VP, 2 clients from Philadelphia, and Greg. As she swirled her glass of Cabernet like she was auditioning for a prestige drama. They all laughed. I didn't. I stared at the steak. I hadn't said a single word all evening. I was there as an accessory. An exhibit. A husband-shaped placeholder. I smiled when they said Cambria is too good for this town. And I nodded when someone made a joke about how rare it is to find a man who's content with less. Content with less. I didn't know I was that man. Not until that dinner. But now I do. So I stood up. Slow. No theatrics. No dramatic declarations. Just a quiet chair scrape, a folded napkin, and 2 hands that had spent the last 7 years paying half a mortgage on a house that no longer felt like home. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for her to explain. I didn't even grab my jacket. And I swear, I still think about that steak. Still wonder what it tasted like. But I guess I'll never know. Because that sentence? It was the last thing she ever said to me as my wife. I walked for 2.5 miles that night. Past bars where couples laughed over margaritas. Past food trucks blasting music I was too old to recognize. Past neon signs that reflected off glass storefronts like memories I couldn't shake. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just walked. The way a man walks when he's trying not to admit something just died inside him. I didn't go home. Instead, I ended up at a roadside diner called Lou's Pit Grill, the kind of place where the coffee burns your throat and no one looks you in the eye unless you spill something. I sat in a booth next to the kitchen, ordered nothing but a refillable Coke, and stared out the window for an hour and 16 minutes. I know because I counted. Counting made it feel like something still made sense. Then my phone buzzed. For missed calls from Cambria. 1 voicemail. I didn't want to listen. I really didn't. But I'm weak. Always have been. So I put 1 earbud in, leaned against the window, and hit play. Her voice came through the line, tight and annoyed. Not panicked, not even apologetic. Alden, seriously? You just left? At my work dinner? Without saying a word? What were you trying to prove? That you're emotional? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Greg had to make an excuse for you. God, you always do this. I'm tired. Click. No, where are you? No, are you okay? No mention of what she said. No regret. Just exhaustion. Like I'd spilled wine on her new shoes, and she couldn't be bothered. I must have replayed that message 10 times. Each time, I heard something new. The contempt in her breath, the way she paused before saying my name like it was a chore, and worst of all, the echo of something else. A faint background voice. A man's laugh. Not from the dinner. Too intimate. Too close. And then, a whisper. Her whisper. Muffled, but unmistakable. He'll come crawling back. He always does. I froze. I held my breath. Rewound. Played it again. And there it was. She wasn't calling me in the cab. She was calling me from somewhere private. Somewhere comfortable. With someone who knew me, who'd watched me bend, and break, and come crawling. And I did crawl. For years. Every time she belittled my job, I smiled and said it's okay. Every time she said, you wouldn't get it, I told myself she was just stressed. Every time she pushed, I moved back. I thought that was love. I thought that's what patient husbands did. But now, sitting there in that greasy booth with a Coke I never touched, and my heart shattered like cheap ceramic, I realized something I didn't want to admit. She never respected me. Not once. Not in the ways that mattered. And worse, she didn't even fear losing me. That night, I didn't go home. I booked a room at a roadside motel under the name Cliff Barton, a name I pulled from an old superhero show we used to watch before she got too busy for those things. The room smelled like bleach and old secrets. I laid on the stiff mattress fully clothed and stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't sleep, because sleep is for people who still believe things can be fixed. I returned home at 6:42 a.m., 37 hours after walking out of that dinner. The sun was just starting to yawn through the blinds, casting that pale orange light that used to make our kitchen feel warm. Now it just made everything look cheap. Plastic. Like a set that had outlived its show. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Cambria's car was gone, probably already at the office making sure her reputation survived the storm she thought I'd bring. But there was no storm. Just me, walking through the front door like a ghost wearing the same shirt I left in, still carrying that voicemail like a tumor in my chest. Everything in the house looked the same, but it all felt wrong. Benson's empty dog bowl was still by the back door. My cereal boxes, the ones she always rolled her eyes at, were stacked neatly in their protective cases. Her shoes were lined up perfectly in the hallway like soldiers guarding a secret I hadn't discovered yet. I stood there for 5 minutes without moving. I think part of me was hoping she'd appear around the corner, look surprised, maybe even remorseful. But no, there was only silence and the faint smell of lavender and distance. Eventually, I walked upstairs, straight into the office she called her focus zone. I never spent much time in there. Not because I wasn't allowed, she never said that, but because every time I stepped inside, I felt like I didn't belong. Like the walls themselves whispered, "You don't get to be here." And there, in the far right corner of her desk, was the drawer she always kept locked. She told me once it had confidential paperwork in it. NDAs, client reports, things I wouldn't understand. I believed her, because belief was easier than suspicion. But now I didn't want easy. I wanted answers. And the universe, maybe out of guilt, gave me one. The key was taped under the keyboard. No drama. No safe hidden behind a painting. Just a small silver key that had probably been there the whole time. Like some quiet dare I had always been too passive to accept. I opened the drawer. Inside were 3 things: a blue folder, a black notebook, and an envelope with my name written in red ink. Not her usual handwriting. My stomach tightened. I opened the folder first. It was full of printed emails. Not from her work account, from a Gmail address I didn't recognize. Dozens of threads between Cambria and someone named Ty. Some were logistical. See you after Denver. Others were flirty, nauseating. But the ones that hurt most weren't the steamy ones. They were the casual ones. The ones where she joked about me. He still thinks I'm flying to Salt Lake next week. It's actually Cabo. Ty. I swear, the man would believe I'm going to space if I wore a blazer while saying it. He's a sweet guy, just. Wallpaper. Always there, never noticed. Wallpaper. I read that word over and over. A part of the house. A background decoration. Harmless. Bland. Forgettable. I couldn't breathe. My mouth went dry. I dropped the folder like it had bitten me and moved on to the black notebook, desperate to find something. Anything. That would make sense of what I'd just read. But what I found was worse. Inside the notebook were lists. Long, bullet-pointed lists titled with things like exit plan, Alden's weak points, and, I kid you not, emotional leverage map. She had dissected me like a specimen. Knew what to say to get me to back down. Knew when I was most tired and unlikely to argue. She tracked patterns. My work shifts. My habits. There was even a section labeled Ideal Separation Narrative, if needed, that included phrases like, "He became emotionally unstable. He was sweet, but couldn't keep up. No one's fault. We just grew apart." My name. My life. Reduced to a contingency plan. But the envelope, that was the final gut punch. It was sealed with wax. Some pretentious gold stamp like this was a medieval divorce decree. I broke it open with shaking hands and pulled out a single page. It was a letter, dated 3 weeks earlier. "Alden, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't time things as perfectly as I hoped. Part of me thought you'd never look in here. I was wrong. I've been planning to leave for a while. Time makes me feel awake. Alive. Like someone actually sees me, not just admires me. You've always been safe, kind, but you dim me. And I'm done living on dim. Please don't contact me when it happens. I want a clean break. No drama. No tears. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be okay. You always are." See, I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I folded it back up, placed it neatly on her desk, walked out of that office, and sat on the stairs until my legs stopped shaking. She was going to leave me. Coldly. Quietly. Efficiently. Like everything else she ever did. And yet, what haunted me most was this. She knew I'd find it. She just assumed I'd do nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't flip furniture or punch a wall. I didn't call her office or send a text or leave a single trace that I knew. I just sat there. at the top of the staircase, holding a notebook that mapped out my weaknesses like some kind of villain's war diary. The sun was fully up now, pouring through the window with that fake warmth that doesn't reach your skin. It just lights up all the corners you'd rather leave dark. I sat there for maybe 40 minutes. Long enough for the numbness to settle in. Long enough for the sadness to start to rot into something colder, heavier. Something like clarity. Cambria was going to leave me. That much was certain. She wasn't second-guessing. She wasn't stuck in a dilemma. She had dates, flights, lawyers, narratives, a polished exit, curated like one of her quarterly presentations. She wasn't cheating in the messy, impulsive way. No, this was project-managed betrayal, strategic infidelity, a PowerPoint affair, and I wasn't going to give her what she wanted, because what she wanted was the clean break, the easy story. She wanted to leave like a heroine in a sad indie movie, emotionally conflicted but ultimately brave. She wanted the sympathy, the silence, the painless ending. I could have given her rage, explosions, ultimatums, but that would have fed her version of me, the emotional man who folds under pressure, the wallpaper husband who fades the moment someone new walks in. Instead, I made a different choice. I decided to disappear first. That day, I began quietly packing the essentials. Not in a suitcase. That would have been too obvious. I used grocery bags, old Amazon boxes, anything lying around that wouldn't raise suspicion if she came home early. I took what I needed: my passport, social security card, birth certificate, a few clothes, my dad's old watch, my hard drive with all my research notes. I even grabbed the 1986 Count Chocula box, still sealed in its protective sleeve. That one felt petty, but right. By noon, I had loaded the boxes into the trunk of my old Honda, parked it 2 blocks away, and returned to the house like nothing had happened. I made coffee. I cleaned the sink. I fed the neighbor's cat, whose owner had left us a key last week. I even lit one of her stupid eucalyptus candles. Everything was normal. Everything was still. At 6:12 p.m., the garage opened. I heard the sound of her heels on the tile before I saw her face. When she finally stepped into the kitchen, she looked unfazed. A bit tired. Annoyed, maybe, but definitely not guilty. Not afraid. She looked at me like I was just a detail. "You're here," she said, putting her bag on the counter. "You ignored my calls." "I needed space," I replied. My voice was calm, too calm. It wasn't mine. It was someone else's. Someone colder. She poured herself a glass of wine. Didn't offer me any. "You embarrassed me, Alden. In front of everyone." I said nothing. "You're not even going to apologize?" Still silence. She sighed, took a long sip, and looked at her phone. "Whatever. I'm exhausted. I've got a client call in 20. Can we not do this now?" Then she walked away. Just like that. Like it never happened. Like the dinner. The voicemail. The drawer. The letter. All of it was some hiccup in her spreadsheet. Something she could just minimize and deal with Q4. But I wasn't a hiccup. Not anymore. That night, while she was asleep, or pretending to be, I logged into our shared accounts and made copies of everything. Emails. Travel records. Bank statements. I didn't delete. I didn't confront. I just documented. Quietly. Precisely. The same way she had mapped me out, I was now mapping her. I transferred my paycheck to a private account she didn't know about. I called a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, a guy who owed me a favor, and asked if he still had that spare room in Tacoma. He did. I booked the flight. One way. She thought I'd come crawling. She thought I'd unravel. But the truth was, I wasn't the one falling apart anymore. She was. She just didn't know it yet. 3 days later, I left without a sound. It was 4:19 in the morning. Cambria was asleep, or at least I think she was. Her back was to me, her breathing slow and measured, one arm flung over the empty half of the bed like she was searching for someone who had already disappeared. I watched her for a few seconds longer than I probably should have, not because I felt love or longing or any of those things I used to associate with her. It was something else, something colder. Like I was staring at the final exhibit in a museum I once adored, still preserved, but no longer alive. I didn't take much. Just the bags I'd already packed and stashed behind the garage. My phone, wiped clean. My hard drive, stuffed deep inside a bag of folded sweaters. A few photos, not of us, but of Benson, from when he still had that dumb crooked ear and used to fall asleep on my chest like I was the only safe place in the world. Everything else I left behind, including the ring. I placed it on her office keyboard, right next to the key she thought I'd never find. That was the only message I left her. No note, no voicemail, no text, just the ring, a quiet period at the end of a sentence she thought she was writing. The cab driver didn't ask questions, just grunted when I got in and kept one hand on the wheel, the other holding a gas station coffee that smelled like regret. As we drove through the still sleeping city, I stared out the window and tried to feel something. Sadness, relief, closure, anything. But there was just a numb fog. Like my emotions were stuck in traffic behind all the years I spent being too agreeable, too forgiving, too understanding. The airport was dead quiet. I sat alone at gate 17 with nothing but a cracked phone, a carry-on, and a folded envelope in my coat pocket. The only thing I hadn't opened yet. It wasn't from Cambria. It was from myself. Something I'd written the night before, after rereading her exit plan notebook one last time. I needed to see how it felt to write the opposite. Not a plan to escape her, but a promise to never become that man again. The one she could study, diagram, and leave like a predictable equation. The plane boarded just after sunrise. I didn't look back. Not at the gate. Not at the terminal. Not even when we took off and the city fell away beneath me like a memory finally letting go of its grip. I flew into Tacoma with no job lined up, no furniture, no real plan beyond getting as far from her web as I could. It should have been terrifying. But it wasn't. It was the first time in years I didn't feel watched. My friend Jordan picked me up in a rusted-out SUV with a cracked dashboard and a trunk that smelled like gym socks and weed. I didn't care. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me a greasy fast food bag and said, "You look like hell." "Feel like it," I muttered, biting into a cold hash brown. We drove in silence for a while until I saw a little dog sitting on a porch in one of the neighborhoods we passed, small, wiry, with the same tilted head Benson used to give me when I'd say the word walk. That hit harder than I expected, harder than the emails, the letter, the drawer. It made me realize something I hadn't been ready to admit until that moment. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought I was when she was around. I missed the version of myself that believed being quiet and supportive was enough. That loyalty earned love. That patience would pay off. But I wasn't patient. I was afraid. Afraid of losing her. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that maybe she was right. That I really was someone who just folded the moment things got hard. But not this time. Because the day after I landed, I sent her one thing. Not a message. Not a call. Just a certified letter, no return address. Inside it, a single sentence, typed in 14 points times New Roman. "You won't get to explain this one." And attached to it, copies of everything I had backed up from her burner Gmail account, labeled for her company's compliance department. I didn't sign it. She'd know who it came from. The first time she called, I let it ring. The second time, I let it go to voicemail. By the sixth call, all within the span of an hour, I muted the number and set it to auto-block. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I knew her voice too well. I could already hear the cadence. The way she'd sound winded, not from running, but from panic. That kind of breathy tremble she used when things slipped out of her control. When the script changed mid-scene and she wasn't the one holding the pen. She never imagined I'd leave first. That much was clear now. Cambria's power had always come from one simple trick, assuming she was untouchable. That no one would ever have the audacity to outmaneuver her. And maybe no one ever did, until I stopped trying to please her and started watching instead. I never intended to ruin her. Not at the start. I just wanted space. A clean break. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized she hadn't just planned to leave. She had orchestrated my emotional collapse like it was a fiscal quarter. There were timelines, bullet points, controlled demolition. And somewhere in her plan, she forgot that even a quiet man can learn to sharpen his silence into a blade. The email from her company came 2 days after I sent the evidence. It wasn't sent to me directly, of course, but I had access. Old habits. Years of being the harmless tech guy meant I knew where she stored her recovery passwords. I watched from a burner account as the dominoes began to fall. The internal audit was launched within 24 hours. An external compliance firm was CC'd. Greg, her golden boy boss with the $1 million smile, was temporarily suspended pending review. Her name disappeared from the leadership section of the company website before the week ended. And through it all, she kept calling. When the block number didn't work, she tried email. Her messages shifted in tone like a woman spinning through every stage of grief in fast forward. First came the confusion. Alden, what did you do? I don't understand what's happening. If you're upset, we can talk. Then the denial. You didn't send those emails. You wouldn't do that. That's not you. You don't have it in you. Then the bargaining. We can fix this. I'll tell them it was a misunderstanding. We'll go to counseling. I swear I didn't mean for things to go this way. And finally, the fear. They're talking about termination. My reputation's on the line. Please, Alden, if you care about me at all, answer. I'm begging you. But I didn't reply. Not because I hated her. Oddly, I didn't. What I felt was worse than hate. I felt nothing. A hollow, surgical emptiness where she used to live in my mind. All the weight of her words, her glances, her disapproval, it had vanished the moment I stopped chasing her approval. The moment I realized I was never her partner. I was her prop. And maybe the most disturbing part? She didn't cry. Not once. Not in the voicemails. Not in the emails. Not even in the one video message she sent late at night, sitting on our couch with mascara half-worn and a blanket wrapped around her like vulnerability could be faked. Her voice cracked, sure, but no tears. Just performance. Rehearsal. A woman trying to retake the lead in a story that no longer cast her. And all the while, the silence did its job. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't show up at her office or post dramatic monologues online. I just vanished. A ghost who left behind nothing but data and a trail of inconvenient truths. But ghosts have power. Not because they scream, but because they haunt. And I could feel it, even states away. In every message she sent. In every attempt to reach me. In every delay between her words. Waiting for the version of me she used to control to suddenly reappear and forgive her. But I wasn't that man anymore. He stayed behind. Somewhere in the ashes of a dinner she thought I'd never walk away from. I never intended to return. Tacoma was cold and gray and nothing like Austin, but it was quiet. And I like quiet now. My days became routine, numb in some ways, but stable. I found temp work at a historical records center, sorting through decades of forgotten municipal documents. It was ironic, really. I was archiving pieces of the past while erasing my own. Then the letter came. Certified. From a law firm in Austin. My name was still on the house deed. Of course it was. I should have expected it. She wanted a clean break, but she still needed me on paper. My signature. My permission. My silence. Some final shred of my presence to sign off on her exit and give her what she never gave me, closure. I thought about ignoring it, letting it rot in a drawer, but something about it felt unfinished. Like the door I slammed shut hadn't quite locked behind me. So I called the number on the letter. I told them I'd sign whatever was needed, but only in person. That was the condition. Maybe part of me needed to see her one last time. Maybe I wanted to make sure she wasn't doing as well as she pretended. Or maybe I just wanted to see her face when she realized I wasn't the man she left. I was the man who left her first. The meeting was scheduled at the house. Our house. I arrived at 8:58 a.m. on a Tuesday, wearing a jacket I bought from a secondhand store and a look I'd been practicing for weeks. One that said nothing, gave nothing, owed nothing. She opened the door before I could knock. Her face stopped me cold. She looked hollow. Still beautiful, yes, but in a way that was brittle. Like a painting left out in the sun too long. The corners were curling. Her eyes were tired. Not the glamorous, hungover tired she wore like a badge after conferences. This was the kind that settled deep in your bones. She didn't smile. She didn't step aside. She just stared for a second too long before quietly saying, "You look different." "I am," I said and stepped past her. The house was eerily unchanged. Same furniture, same arrangement, same faint scent of lavender and lemon and the lie of a perfect life. But everything felt colder, more artificial. Like a model home with no real history, just the memory of what was once real. The lawyer wasn't there yet, so we sat in the living room. Not across from each other, not next to each other, just apart, like magnets that had finally reversed their polarity and would never click back together again. "I didn't expect to see you," she said after a minute. "You asked for my signature," I replied. She nodded slowly. "I didn't think you'd come back." "I didn't," I said. "I just came to end something you started." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. There was a weight between us, heavier than anger, heavier than grief. A silence built from years of pretending we understood each other. I lost everything. she said quietly, almost like she was admitting it to herself for the first time. The job, the position, Greg's still suspended. Ty stopped answering once the emails got out. Everyone thinks I lied to HR, that I manipulated my way up. You did, I said flatly. That's not a narrative. That's documentation. She flinched. Good. Do you hate me? She asked. I had waited for that question, imagined it 100 times. But now that it came, it sounded so small, so human. No, I said. I don't hate you. That would mean I still feel something. She looked down at her hands. Her nails weren't done. Her jewelry was missing. Even the wedding ring, the one she hadn't taken off for years even when things were bad, was gone. She looked like someone who had finally realized the empire she built had no foundation. I read the letter, she said after a pause. The one you mailed. With the sentence, "You won't get to explain this one." You understood it? She nodded. I thought I could control everything, even how you'd react. I always thought you needed me more than I needed you. You were right about one thing, I said, standing. I used to. The lawyer arrived 10 minutes later. The paperwork was simple, a release of shared ownership, a few disclaimers, a signature line. I signed it without reading. I didn't need to. She could have the house, the city, the reputation she'd already burned to ash. Before I left, she followed me to the door. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. But I am sorry. I looked at her one last time. Not the way I used to, not with longing or even resentment, but with distance, with the kind of eyes you give someone you once knew in a different life. Then we're finally even, I said, because I don't expect closure. And then I walked away. This time, she didn't laugh. This time, she didn't say a word. This time, the steak never even made it to the table. It's been 7 months since I walked out of that dinner. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm back there, sitting at that long white table, surrounded by polished silverware, business laughter, and the weight of her voice as it cut me clean in half. Let's be honest. He's not exactly built for ambition. It echoes less now, quieter. Not because it stopped maturing, but because I stopped bleeding from it. Tacoma is rainy, yes. A little gray around the edges. But it's honest. People here don't care what kind of shoes you wear. No one's trying to scale you or use you to hit quarterly goals. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm allowed to breathe without performing for someone else's expectations. I got a full-time job at the record center. Nothing glamorous, but it pays enough. I rent a small place over a bookstore. The floors creak and the heater complains in the winter, but it feels like mine. I drink coffee on the fire escape in the mornings. I started journaling, not Reddit posts, real pages. Ink. My thoughts are messy and sometimes dull, but they're mine. No one's editing them into bullet points for a PowerPoint slide. 3 weeks ago, I adopted a dog. His name is Silas. He's part terrier, part mystery, and 100% chaos. He chewed through my couch pillow on day 2 and peed on my tax documents the same week. But he sleeps curled up next to my feet every night like he was born there. When I say walk, his ears perk up, just like Benson's used to. He doesn't know anything about Cambria, and I don't tell him. I heard she moved to Florida. New firm, new city, new narrative. She's already rebranded, no doubt. That's what she does. There's probably some version of the story where I abandoned her and she rose stronger from the ashes. Let her have it. Let her build statues out of her excuses. I'm not a character in her story anymore. But maybe the best part? I'm not angry. I thought I would be. I thought the bitterness would follow me forever, cling to me like a shadow I couldn't scrub off. But it didn't. Not because I forgot, I didn't. But because I finally realized none of it was about me. Her betrayal? Her manipulation? Her carefully mapped out exit plan? It wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was proof of her fear, of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved without the armor of control. I used to think love meant shrinking myself to fit someone else's definition of acceptable, of admirable, of enough. Now I know better. Love is not obedience. Love is not silence. Love is not a man folding like a lawn chair just to avoid conflict. Love, real love, is standing, even if it means standing alone. The other day, I passed by a restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, just some place called Juniper and Rye. Inside, a couple was laughing. The guy was telling a story with wild hand gestures, knocking over his water as the girl wiped tears from her eyes from laughing too hard. It hit me unexpectedly. Not jealousy, not sadness, just possibility. The idea that somewhere, someday, there might be someone who laughs with me, not at me. Who doesn't measure me in promotions or salary or status. Someone who doesn't try to upgrade me like an old phone that's lost its shine. But until then, I have my own apartment. I have a job I don't hate. I have Silas, and the fire escape, and a stack of blank pages still waiting to be filled. And most of all, I have myself. Fully. Finally. Quietly. Completely.